Okay, Your Worship.
Are we live?
Yes.
Okay, just going to call the meeting to order, folks. But before we go any farther, we've had a technical glitch that arrived today, and I'd like to ask Mr. Beale if he could just explain what that is and what the implications are for the meeting tonight.
Yeah, as a result, it looks like the lightning storm we had last Thursday caused a surge, and there's a couple of pieces of equipment in our audiovisual that have failed. So Ivans was here for the afternoon trying to repair them, unable to. So we're currently in a workaround where I'm tied directly into the recording device. The unfortunate part with that is that once we make, where there are in-camera items tonight, once we make a motion to go in camera, I will have to turn it off, and we will not be able to come back for the final motion on the live stream where we close the meeting. So unfortunately, once we make the motion to go into in-camera, I will have to turn it off, and will not be able to turn it back on with the same stream.
Okay. Any council have any questions on that? Regrettable, but hey, that's technology, right? Thank you, Mr. Beale. So what we'll do is we will go through a roll call as normal so that we can all get set up for the next few minutes. So I'll start with Lori Bickford. Are you present?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I am.
Tourism and Business, Ron Kelly Spurls.
Yes, I'm present, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Fire Chief Bowser.
Yes, I'm here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Becky Goodwin.
Yes, I'm here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Dwayne Acton.
I am also here, Your Worship. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Beale, I think you're still here, right?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Your Worship.
Donna Beale.
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you. I'm here.
Thank you. Jamie Burke.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Your Worship and Council.
Councillor Finney.
I'm here, John.
Thank you. Councillor Butcher.
Yes, I am here. Thank you.
Councillor Black.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much.
Councillor O'Neill is not here. I will speak to that in a few moments. Councillor Evans.
I am here, and I'd ask you all to hold your applause.
Hey, it worked. Councillor Michaud.
I am here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Councillor Tower.
I am here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Aiken.
I'm here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. And myself, I am present. Just would like everybody to know that Councillor O'Neill wanted people to know that she had a scare which they thought was possibly a minor heart attack, if there is ever such a thing. And she did text me a few minutes ago from Moncton. She is stable, and they're doing a few tests, and they've arrived at a conclusion that they're going to take her down to St. John to the heart specialists in the next day or so. She wants you all to know that she's doing fine, and that she looks forward to a healthy outcome of this. And she also suggests that she has a birthday coming up very soon, and this might be a nice time for people to welcome her to her birthday time and many more years after that. As usual, we are on IT, as you heard. This is an unusual one for us today with the change in the system, which means we can't do even as much as we normally try to do. But regularly, of course, if I fade off, and it seems to be mostly mine that fades off, Deputy Mayor Aiken will jump in to continue to chair the meeting. And if anybody else fades out, just let us know when you're back in. And of course, if there's any questions of anything, please send them on to the clerk, and we'll try to get back to you within the next couple of days or so. Okay.
Excuse me, Your Worship.
Yes.
If I may, Manager Todd Cole is also present this evening.
Ah. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else I missed?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Thanks for that addition. And Todd, we're not going to ask you to speak because you'll show up on the screen. And We will move to, is there a motion to approve the agenda now?
So moved, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor moved. Seconder?
I'll second, Your Worship.
Councillor Michaud seconds. Question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. So we move right into briefing on a rezoning text amendment. Ms. Pickford, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. I'm going to share my screen so that you'll be able to see some of the PowerPoint presentation. Is everybody seeing that, or? Yes. Yep. Okay. Great. So tonight is just a discussion meeting introducing a application that we've received regarding a proposed text amendment, which would look at introducing abattoirs to the municipal plan and zoning bylaw, as well as the introduction to a potential rezoning for a property at 72 Crescent Street to carry out this activity. So just a little bit of background. An application was came forward regarding an abattoir, which is also another name for a slaughterhouse, and it's a processing facility as well. In looking at the application and seeing where it would actually fit within the town, it was discovered that the zoning bylaw does define abattoir, but it does not specifically put it in any particular zone in the town of Sackville. The only thing that it does specify within the zoning bylaw is that an abattoir is not considered an agricultural use. So in looking at the use further, we look, of course, to the municipal plan, which is in the hierarchy of the documents. It is the one where we get our guidance on land use in the long term for the town. The municipal plan too is silent on abattoirs and doesn't actually address that use specifically. However, when you look at the designations that are available in the municipal plan, the one that seems to be most appropriate for the introduction of this particular use would be the industrial designation. And I've put up the future land use map, which shows kind of those the key designations in the municipality. So dark green being agriculture conservation, light green being rural residential, purple being residential, and yellow is mixed use, and of course orange is the industrial designations. So part of the municipal plan, actually in the preamble to that designation, it actually talks to the intention of that industrial designation is to provide good highway access for distribution of products, as well as creating areas in town where there's limited impact on residential areas. So that leaves us with two industrial key points, one at the south by the this exit, which is our current most used industrial park. And then we have this pre-zoned area or designated area up by the Walker Road exit, which is more of a future down the road, open up industrial area. In looking at this whole scenario, though, it was, one of the challenges that we have with abattoirs and slaughterhouses is that, it's generally more sensitive and a more what you would call a more intensive use of land. So as part of this proposal, it was looked at as, to add it directly to an industrial zone would not put the level of control in it that that use should probably be looked at. So what we would propose is that we would create an intensive resource zone. And this zone would only be permitted in those industrial designated areas. And each request for this particular use would have to be done through a development agreement, which would mean that it's more of a site-specific analysis. So each request, if there was multiple requests down the road for abattoirs, they would have to go through that council rezoning process before they would ever be approved to do so. This is actually the property that the individual is looking at right now for rezoning. The blue rectangle indicates the existing building that's been built on the property. They're actually only looking at using half of the structure itself for the abattoir slaughterhouse. So that's why this the area outlined in red would be the area that would be being considered for proposed rezoning. This is a photo of the building that's on site. Again, this line indicates the half of the building which would be being looked at for the proposed zoning. So just rezoning that eastern half of the property and the building to an intensive resource. Again, it would be through a development agreement if council wished to pursue it to permit that. So this is Crescent Street here. You'll see in the next photo that there is 2 street frontages for this particular property. So it also fronts on Fleet Street. Again, this line over being the portion of the building which is actually being proposed. Again, a development agreement, when you're doing a rezoning through that process, it allows you to have a greater control over that particular use on that particular site. So some examples of things that could be included within that development agreement would be things like no penning of animals outside the facility. It could address potential smell control issues that could be identified and how the applicant will control that on site. And, it could also address items like ensuring that animals are unloaded at the rear of the building versus the street frontage on Crescent Street. So because this requires, in order to introduce this, the first component of it would be for the council to decide whether they're interested in actually amending their bylaw to allow abattoirs within the town of Sackville. And in doing this, they would be looking at passing a resolution that would start the process of amending both the municipal plan and the zoning bylaw. This would set out a public engagement schedule, including public presentation, public hearing, as well as, of course, your bylaw readings. And it would also, as part of that, be developing that new zone within that industrial designation, which I was proposing as intensive resource. If council, of course, was not interested in allowing abattoirs to be added to the bylaw itself, then of course their option would be to deny the resolution that started that process. If, of course, they do want to consider the text amendment components and introduce a new zone to cover this use, then they can look at the rezoning component of the 72 Crescent Street property. Again, that would be site specific, and of course the bylaw has to be amended at the same time to do that. And we would be, as part of that process, also looking at walking through that public engagement component, and as well as preparing development agreements and that sort of thing. If council's not interested in entertaining the rezoning component, then they can choose not to pass that resolution to consider the rezoning. So you essentially, the first part is the amendments to the bylaw itself. If that's a go, then the rezoning can be considered. If council chooses not to consider the amendments to the bylaw, then by default, the amendment for the rezoning is not continued. So that's my brief overview. I know it's a lot to kind of throw and try to digest at once, so I'm certainly open to some discussion if there's any interest in that.
Okay, council, this is the purpose of the meeting is for you to ask any questions you have on the topic. So are there questions? If you could let me signal to me that you'd like to. Councillor Michaud, please.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of items here. First of all, with a property, is it normal to rezone part of a piece of property one way, another piece and another, leave it the way it is, or would that whole piece be identified as rezoned to accommodate abattoir? Also, you have indicated about a development agreement each time this would come up, and you mentioned some specifics that we would, might consider controlling, such as smell, caging, loading. Is that not something that could be identified up front, and that way put into play so that when somebody is applying to rezone the property, those are all in place already? Or is that something that we have to do this way?
So I'll try to address them in order, and if you don't feel I've answered properly, just definitely remind me of the questions. But to address first the zoning of multiple zones on one property, that is a common practice in town. We do have a number of properties that that happens. The main areas you tend to see it most often would be in the areas where we have servicing running along the street, and to maximize the use of the servicing, we would pre-zone the front to a different zone than the rear portion of the property, which is further away from the servicing or may not be able to be serviced by the public sewer and water system. So it is a common practice to do where there's a constraint where you wouldn't want to allow a particular use to have the full range of the entire property. So the second part of the development agreement, and the challenge with just flat out adding abattoir to the zoning bylaw as a permitted use in a particular zone is there is such a gravity of items that you're going to want to look at. In some particular cases, especially in that industrial designation, there may be properties that are too close to a residential property that you're not going to want to allow them to just, as of right, go there. There may be other constraints. There might be an environmentally sensitive area immediately adjacent to it. So again, it's hard to come up with specific enough regulations that would allow it to adapt itself to an entire zone versus doing it through a development agreement and a special zone itself, which is called a intensive resource. That allows us that greater control to say, okay, let's look at this particular property in the industrial park and see if this is an adequate site for it or not. And then, not that this is a use that tends to, there doesn't tend to be a lot of these uses occurring. You might see one or two in a municipality, but it's very uncommon to see multiple ones reoccurring. That's why it's more, I would choose to do it in that manner, give you guys the control to look at the site that it's being proposed and then tailor that development more to that.
Councilor Bishop, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks very much for the explanation. One thing that you had mentioned in the bylaw indicates the definition of abattoir. However, it's not in our municipal plan. I'm just wondering, as that was reviewed, is there anything else that's within that bylaw that's not been identified within the plan that we might be looking at here? And also, when was the last time we looked at our plan in its entirety? Seems to me it's been 4.5 years ago now, if not more.
Yeah, so the last time we reviewed the bylaw was in 2016. We tend to review it every 5 to 10 years. So we will be coming up on a review where we would be looking at a more comprehensive overview of the town itself. To often uses like an abattoir, which, we find it's defined in the zoning bylaw, but it doesn't appear in the plan. It's not uncommon for the plan not to specifically name every use, but generally speaking, there's policies that are written broad enough that you could say, well, this is referencing that type of use. But in this particular case, because it's the zoning bylaw has specifically said it's not agriculture. There's really nothing that's drawing on policy to say this is specifically this type of use. But certainly during that review process, there's constantly a list that's ongoing of what we call housekeeping amendments. And as these discussions happen with clients and as little items pop up along the way, we make note of them and they get addressed during that review process.
Thank you.
Councillor Finney.
Ms. Bickford, I was just wondering, as a matter of fact, is there something like this in other municipalities within the industrial park? And could you give me an example of a few of the municipalities that have such a thing and such an agreement? And I'm just curious, how do you plan on the smell control? I wonder how you're going to plan to do that. I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, so certainly I'll just kind of touch first on that smell aspect of it. Is what we would do is we identify it as an issue that needs to be addressed. And then we work from there to see how the applicant could propose to contain that. So, it could become that it has to be refrigerated within the containments of the building itself. There's numerous ways that you can do it. But what you're doing is your goal is setting out to identify those main issues that you see as a concern, and then addressing it through the agreement as to how best it can be controlled. You do your best to attempt to address it. I mean, sometimes there may be things that are beyond your control to a certain degree, but certainly I think by setting out and identifying it as an issue up front, you have a better chance of getting it addressed in the development agreement and making sure that there's an active plan in place to limit that issue. As far as them throughout the Southeast, there's not a lot of them. There's probably maybe 3 or 4 that I can identify. There's one in the Memramcook area. There's one more in the Beaubassin East area. And then there's one more in just outside the Pettit-Kodiak area, I believe. What we tend to do in the Southeast, and this intensive resource is not a zone that I myself have created, they tend to be zoned that particular way throughout the Southeast. And it's kind of that idea that we can address those issues. They're handled very similar, that they're more site specific and controlled through conditions and agreements.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions on the topic? Councillor Evans, please.
Yes, I want to say that I think this is a great idea. There are 2 separate aspects to it. One is whether it happens, and the second is how it happens. And I think this is good. I want the record to show that Sackville is open for business. This is a legitimate business. It's an important business. I know people in the beef producing business, and getting animals butchered is a challenge. So I think this is a great initiative. And I really like the flexibility of the development agreement that will make sure that it's done in a way that is satisfactory to us, so that we can say yes to business and make sure they do it this way so that it works well for everyone. I think this is great. And just sort of on principle, I would have to be confronted with something pretty awful to not start the process of having a public hearing and having full debate. So this doesn't reach that test. So I think that I'm hoping that a motion will come forward next week for us to start the process.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Any other questions of council? So the plan, as I understand it, Laura, you can correct me, but in essence, there will be a draft resolution prepared for council next week, and council will have the opportunity to take it to the next step and consider that next step, or stop it right there if they chose to turn the resolution down. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's correct. The only thing that I would add is that I will break this into 2 separate resolutions, just so that first we can deal with the bylaw amendment itself, And then the second one, of course, would be the site-specific rezoning component, so that if council chose to continue with the text amendment, but not the site-specific, then we would be able to at least continue with part of it. Or council, of course, can enter into both resolutions and set the process, and the two would run hand in hand.
Councillor Finney, you have another question?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. Ms. Bickford, I was just wondering, the ones that you mentioned that are in the southeast, have they had problems with them when they first started? And were any of them removed, or were there solutions found in order to make up for the problems that one wouldn't know at the very beginning of such a project?
I have not heard any specifics on issues surrounding each individual one. I know that the Memram Cook one did recently do an expansion to theirs, so I'm not anticipating, but certainly to me, part of the process would be drawing on the experiences in the other offices with this particular use and using that to address potential issues that might have come up in the other one. We would, of course, would get into that in more detail when we start to look at the use in the development of the zones and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll just have to wait and see exactly what happens with the initial beginning of the process and see what happens from there. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any other questions. I hope you're all comfortable with the brief and what the questions will be for next week. I'm not sure, Ms. Bickford, but the abattoir in Memram Cook, I think they won Farm of the Year from the Chignecto Soil and Crop about 2 years ago. So I think that's the same one that I attended the resolution for. So it was certainly well regarded. So, okay, so we're good with number one. We shall move on to item number 2 then. Aerial truck repairs. Fire Chief Bowser, you're up.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Our aerial truck is a 75-foot ladder platform that we use on a large variety of emergency responses. And as of lately, it's experienced a mechanical concern, which we had diagnostically tested, and it was determined that the transmission in that unit is failing and needs to be rebuilt, which is a large job. I must note this was not a budgeted repair. However, we do have a 2020 capital project for radio communications that will not be moving forward this fall due to TMR and regionalized dispatching possibly just getting back up and slowly moving forward. So in speaking with our treasurer, we could possibly use these funds to reallocate for this unexpected fleet repair, pardon me. We did reach out to 3 different companies and received 3 different quotes, and we are proposing a quote from East Can Fire in the amount of $14,662.50, HST included. And I must note in that price is a 2-year warranty on unlimited mileage, parts, and labor if something does happen within those 2 years after the repair has been corrected.
Excellent. I'd like to know, how do you determine mileage of a ladder?
So it's a mechanical ladder that's a good point, Your Worship, but it's a mechanical ladder that's hooked to the apparatus. So it is all documented on mileage within that apparatus. All
right. Knew there'd be a good answer. So any questions on this beside that silly one? It's an important piece. Councillor Evans.
Well, you were about to say, I think what I was going to say, and I'll just ask the chief to confirm this, but the transmission strikes me as a vital component. We have a very expensive vehicle and it needs to be operational. So I think this is, I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but I think this is a very obvious thing to do. My question is about the budgeted money. I'm not sure about what the $20,000 was for and why it's not needed this year. Could you elaborate on that part for me?
Certainly, Councillor Evans. So the $20,000 that was budgeted for as we look to go to a TMR radio system, a trunk mobile radio system that will have interoperability with all the emergency agencies, that unfortunately was put on hold during COVID, and they're starting to just get back up into that now. So they've reached back out to other municipalities asking if there still is an interest there. to tie into that system, which we still have that interest. But however, it's probably not going to happen before the end of this fiscal year.
Gotcha. Okay. So we can expect something on this same topic probably next budget year.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Michaud, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a couple of questions, actually. First off, in regards to the operation of this vehicle, how many hours? I mean, the operation not only kilometers. That component helps operate other components on the vehicle, from my understanding. So, how many hours of operating time has that vehicle had since we've purchased it? I'm just kind of curious in regards to what the expected longevity is of a transmission on this type of vehicle. My other question is the companies that we received the quotes from, the one that's being suggested, I believe they're located here in New Brunswick, is that correct? And my other question is, how long will this apparatus be out of service, and what's the backup plan for that piece of apparatus?
Good questions, Councillor Michaud. Thank you. So I'll answer your first one. I'm not sure how many hours have been put on the unit since we obtained that unit approximately 7 to 8 years ago. But not a lot of hours have been put on that truck. It goes out to a lot of commercial calls and the members have it out to trainings, but there's not an abundance of hours that have been put on that truck since we have secured that unit. One of the things as it relates to what's our backup plan, when this mechanical issue occurred, I was in quick contact with Chief Jones from Amherst Fire Department and let him know that we were having an issue with one of our trucks, like we do from time to time. And he put his crew on standby, so that way, if we do have a large scale incident where that piece of equipment is required, they're automatically getting paged out as well. Even if they're not needed, they'll still be there to assist in the event of something fails on that truck from now to the repair. The duration of the repair, I'm being told by the mechanics, is 7 to 10 days downtime, and that's business days. So approximately we're looking at potentially a 2-week window. And all three of the companies that we obtained quotes from, 2 of them are in Moncton and 1 is in Fredericton.
I guess my other component was the expectation around longevity on a transmission in this type of apparatus. Is it common that this type of failure happens with these type of apparatuses, or is this kind of a surprise that we anticipated that the longevity would have been longer on this?
Well, it certainly is a surprise that it didn't last longer than originally planned, because there is not a lot of kilometers on that unit as a whole and/or hours. But it's certainly one of those things that really is unpredictable. And basically, there's clutch plates in the transmission that allows, when you take the truck out of gear and put it back in gear, those are engaging and disengaging and shutting the PTO off so the transmission is not spinning. And those clutch brakes have started to fail, allowing the transmission to continue to spin, which is causing a clunking noise in the transmission, which again could lead to greater damage if not corrected.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions, Councillor Michaud. Are there any other questions? Councillor Finney.
Craig, can you tell me, as a matter of fact, I mean, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we had that machine completely checked over before we purchased it, did we not? Would you say maybe the company who checked it over missed something when they did that, or it's just one of these fluke things that happens with the amount of use that we've had? Maybe not a lot, but it's just one of those things that happen. It either could be like the old saying goes, was it a Monday or a Friday truck instead of a Wednesday?
So to answer your question, that you're right, the truck was fully inspected by a structural engineer. Everything was inspected and we had a full report for that prior to the purchase. That was part of the purchase agreement. But I believe it's one of these unforeseen things that has reared its ugly head to know that it needs a repair, and it's just an unfortunate thing.
Okay, Greg, thank you. That's exactly what I thought, but thanks for the explanation.
You're welcome.
Any other councillors wish to ask questions? Not seeing any, so we can then move on to item 3. That sounds like Mr. Acton wants us to talk about salt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of council, as you all know, part of our operating budget for winter control, we require approximately 800 to 1,200 metric tons of road salt for our winter season. I hate to say it, but we are in preparation mode for winter control, and this is typically the time of year where we look to fill our salt dome in preparation for that white stuff to come, hopefully months from now. But so we are looking to fill our salt dome. We reached out to our typical supplier, Windsor Salt from Pugwash, with respect to an updated bulk salt supply agreement. And they've come back to us with an agreement for the quantity of salt that we're looking for this 2020-2021 winter season. There was a slight increase in price from last year. It was $73.37 per ton delivered last year, and it is $74.47 per ton delivered for the 2020-2021 season. We currently have about a quarter of our salt dome full and are looking to move on filling the salt dome. And if you recall, last year I had some discussions around this because there's very few salt suppliers. Pugwash was the only one. There was another one, Nutrien out of Sussex, who did open up for a 2-year period. That 2-year period is ending after this season. And then we're not sure where they're going to be after that. And as I mentioned last time, one of the fears I have is if we switch gears and go with another supplier, that supplier is only here this year and may be gone next year. That is why, we've always had good service, good support. We have a good working relationship with Pugwash, and they've always come through on us when we needed salt. They've always been able to get it for us. So we were looking to try to renew a bulk agreement with Pugwash for the 2020-21 season. I did reach out, however, and did some research for council with respect to Nutrien out of Sussex. That is what DTI are currently using. The difference in price, and it varies, and the reason it varies is because depending on who we get to truck the salt, it could be anywhere from $3, Pugwash is anywhere from $3 a ton more to $6 a ton more, depending on what supplier we use to truck our salt. So I mentioned that. The other fear that I have as well with Nutrien out of Sussex is that DTI, and I did also find out that a fair amount of the other municipalities in the region are also using Nutrien, and I'm a little concerned that everybody in this region are using them, and are they going to be able to provide us with the salt quantity that we would need, knowing that that they are a lot of municipalities, large ones at that are and DTI across all the province are getting their salt from them. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Your Worship.
So just thank you, Councillor. Can you just clarify? I wasn't quite clear. Did you earlier say that Sussex was due to close next year as well? Or?
They did close, and I mentioned this last year. They did close. They did reopen for a 2-year period to supply DTI with salt for a 2-year contract, and that is why they're open for the 2020-2021 season. And then, as far as we know, unless things change, they are closing the doors again.
Okay, thank you.
So they just opened for a 2-year period last year and this year.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Evans, please.
Yes, my question is not on the obvious topic, it's on something else. You say the dome is currently a quarter full, and we use between 800 and 1,200 or 1,100 tons a year. How much does the dome hold? So in other words, do we stock more than roughly a year's worth? Like, can we buy in bulk and store it, or is it pretty well 1 year at a time? Because it seems to me we do this every year, and we buy roughly the same amount.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Yeah, we typically will use more than one salt dome full of salt. So basically what we try to do is we try to put somewhere around 800 ton in our salt dome, in that ballpark, at the beginning of the winter season. And that will run us, I'm going to pick halfway through the season, but as you're well aware, it all depends on the season. It could be early or it could be later, depending on how severe the winter season is and how much salt we're using. So we typically end up, once we have it full in the fall, we typically will need to replenish that somewhere between January, February, March timeframe, but we always typically need to replenish it at some point with at least, maybe half of that again. So again, that's where we're coming up with the 800 to 1,200 metric tons of salt.
Okay, is that good, Councillor Evans? Okay, Councillor Michaud, please.
Thank you, Worship. Just for clarity on the pricing difference with Nutrien, you said it's $3 a ton more that Windsor is, or that Nutrien is?
That Pugwash Windsor salt is $3 more.
$3 more. And you're indicating that most municipalities in our region are utilizing Nutrien right now?
From the research I did, Dieppe, basically Dieppe is piggybacking on DTI and therefore using that. Moncton is, Shediac is, although Shediac is getting theirs from a local DTI detachment near Shediac. And I wasn't able to reach Riverview to see exactly what they were doing. And I suspect Fredericton, because in reaching out with Nutrien, they would not divulge the municipalities to me. So I had to turn around and do my own research, and all they indicated was a lot of the bigger municipalities are piggybacking.
And have any of these municipalities that you were chatting with, have they mentioned a fact of supply issue with Nutrien?
Not to me, they not, no.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Tower, please.
Thank you, Worship. Dwayne, it seems to me a few years back that we had reached an agreement on a 2 or 3 year supply, guaranteed purchase, and they gave us a lower price. Have we ever tried that since?
It's not anything that I have reached out to Pugwash on. It's definitely something I guess I could ask, but I'm not sure what the answer would be. I know I don't think I've done multiple year contract in my time back with the town.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
If I could add just a few of the things that probably would cause some issues there is the price of fuel over a 3-year period. How do you determine, that if fuel goes up, that the trucking costs could go up, and they probably would reluctantly not do a long-term contract for that reason. Or if they did, they would put some type of a stipulation in that we have to follow some type of a fuel taxing or fuel surcharge agreement with them.
Yeah, I understand that. It just seems to me when we did it that last time, because we were guaranteeing, because other municipalities weren't buying it as much, and we were willing to commit for a period of 3 years, that they settled in and give us a price for that period. So that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Finney, please.
Dwayne, who did the government or Riverview or Moncton, who did they get their salt from before? this other company other than Windsor Salt?
Based on what I've been able to find out, they have typically piggybacked with DTI, so they'll typically follow what DTI do.
Well, where was their salt coming from?
I believe it was, according to Dieppe, I believe it was the last contract with DTI was through Pugwash.
Okay, so they switched and did that. I wonder if we could piggyback.
Oh yes, we can. That's what I'm saying. We can piggyback with Nutrien if so wished. I'm just saying that part of the problem here is we don't know what's going to happen with Nutrien after the end of this year, and if we jump ship now, that relationship could be soured with Pugwash, and then what do we do then at that point? So,
just curious to know exactly what's the government going to do if they do go belly up. Are they, is Windsor Salt going to turn around and be soured against them when before they were customers as well?
I'm not sure. A very good question. One of the problems that we're all going to be faced with if Nutrien doesn't stay in business is that there's only one salt supplier in our region.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much, Dwayne.
Yep, thank you.
Councilor Misha, you did have it up. You're okay now?
No, I was just, I guess if there's concern in regards to Windsor Salt's position, if we choose not to go with Windsor Salt, ultimately, when it comes to competition, sometimes things like this make other people sharpen their pencils a little bit more, right? So, ultimately, with what was happening with Nutrien is the fact that the government stepped in here to do this contract because of the loss of the potash industry in Sussex, right? So, I would think that if the service is good and the product is fine, and hopefully that they'll maintain this or at least be an option for municipalities.
Yeah, always good to have a couple of suppliers. Hopefully that happens. I don't see any other from council. Mr. Acton, you said that I just wanted to be clear in my head. So we would buy the amount that you said, but it would come in 2 delivery sets. Is that the way I understood it? So you'd go fill up the shed and then later you'd come back and after it gets lower, you would come back with the other part of that purchase. Did I hear that correct?
Not really. Typically what we do with the salt agreement is we would have an agreement with them to purchase somewhere between 800 and 1,200 tons. That when we get that salt between now and next spring is kind of up to us and when we require it. So we typically will require in and around 400, 600, 800 tons right now. Until we fill our salt dome, and then depending on how the season go in January, February, March, we're probably going to need another 400 ton or so to top up our salt dome at that point in time. So we just do the trucking of it's typically done in 2 installments. I think I've even seen 3 installments depending on how busy of a season it is with respect to the salt.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions on salt from council? Okay, we move on to a gift agreement. Mr. Kelly Sparrows, you have this?
Yes, thank you, Worship, council members. This is in relationship to some items that have been in the possession of the town that we feel are appropriate to donate to the Tantramar Heritage Trust, in which they have requested that we donate to them. And the first set of items are related to the HMCS Sackville. They were loaned by the town to the trust in 2009 for an exhibit celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Canadian Navy, which took place in 2010. And at that time, there was some talk about possibly putting some of these artifacts on display in the lobby of the new town hall, which, of course, as you know, opened in 2012. As time went on, the town installed artwork in the lobby, and the items remained part of the exhibit at the Bolton House Center until spring of 2013, at at which time when the exhibit was dismantled, it was agreed between the town and the trust that the items would remain at the Bolton House for storage and preservation until a decision could be made about whether or not the town would like to make a formal gift of them to the Heritage Trust. So this was originally, I guess, sort of the tentative idea at the time. It's been discussed over the years. It kind of became a back burner project, and with COVID and some extra, I guess, time, the trust has been turning to some odds and ends of things that they wanted to finish up, and one of them was the potential of a gift agreement of these items to the Heritage Trust. As the town doesn't have a formal gallery or exhibition space, and we also are not in the habit of keeping historic items, preservation and that sort of thing, we feel it will be appropriate to donate them to the Heritage Trust. There's also a second set of items which last January we began the process of cleaning out the storage room here at Town Hall, and among the items were a number of things that I think had been, put aside for various reasons. Some old paintings and logbooks and things that really were of no interest or use to the town. That the real decision was either would we throw them out or would we offer them to the Heritage Trust, and they came and looked at them and they took several of the items, and so the part of the second gift agreement is for those items, which essentially are things that were of interest to them, but really were about no other value otherwise. So, so as I say, it is our intention that a motion will be brought forward next week, formally gifting these items to the Heritage Trust, and I'd be glad to try to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Councillor Evans, please.
I really like this idea of putting things that are worth keeping in the hands of people who know how to look after them and can make them available to the public. So I think this is a great initiative. My question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what is a jack day? As far as I know, it's a bird. And I don't think we're giving them 3 birds. So can you tell me what, sorry, jackdaw, can you tell me what it is?
I actually looked it up too, and I believe it's just an item that you use for display. I don't really have any more formal understanding of it than that. I can certainly ask the Heritage Store. Yeah,
I can look at it too. When I read that, I thought, so I Googled it, and the only thing I could find was a bird. So yeah. Just wanted to make sure that we're not giving away birds. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Michaud, please.
Thank you, Worship. I'm curious as to how the municipality came into possession of these artifacts. If they were items that were presented or given to the municipality for preservation or to display. And if they're already being housed for the most part by the Heritage Trust, I'm just uncertain as to why we would consider gifting them. I always want to make sure that if we're providing something as a municipality, that we ensure that being the stewards of that item, that the purpose of it is being carried through. And seeing some other things, it was very hard to, it was like a written, the other one's kind of typed out here, but it's a written agreement. I'm trying to make out several of the items here, something from the 8th Hussars commemorative plaque, something to do with the First Methodist Church. And, there's a dedication happening this weekend in regards to the bell there. Taking place up on Main Street on the old property there. So I'm just kind of wondering what these items were, if they were given to the municipality for a certain purpose, before we just make the decision that we provide them to the Heritage Trust without any maybe input as to what we would like to see as a municipality in regards to those items being done with.
Sure. I can certainly look into finding out more information about the HMCS Sackville items, how they came to be in the possession of the town. I imagine there are, if there's not a paper trail, I'm sure I can find some sort of oral history about that. The other items I think would be much more of a challenge because, again, I can ask around, but I know they've sat in that storage room at least as long as I've been here, which is 8 years, and I don't know if anybody has any recollection of how they got there before that. Some of them actually are town items, though, so there should be some history that I can find out about those. And in terms of the specific things, Councillor Miso, I can certainly send you a typed summary from the gift agreement that outlines more clearly what the items are, especially the ones that were found here in Town Hall. I think the reason for requesting the formal transfer to the Heritage Trust just has to do with it's essentially a process of their record keeping, and then also it enables them to work with the items in a way that will preserve them because they have ownership over them, rather than them essentially working with someone else's items, which I think is kind of both problematic in terms of them having to perhaps get permissions or things from us that would be essentially unnecessary since they are the experts. But as I say, I certainly can find out all the history of those items, and I'll let you know.
Great, thank you. I guess a follow-up to that would be, aside from these items, us as a municipality, we have a lot of records and dating back in regards to municipal business and municipal council, etc. And the archival of that type of information, I'm not sure where we could go with that, but it seems that if we're going to start addressing these type of things and finding the appropriate organization that's going to ensure that history and heritage is upheld, that we might want to start looking into something in regards to our own records too, and the fact of ensuring that those are kept in a manner that are something that can be looked back upon someday if somebody wants to.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tower, please.
Thank you, Worship. I know that some of those gifts from the Sackville, the HMCS Sackville, were brought up to celebrate different occasions we've had and communications we've had, because we've always been a fairly close conversation until the last, let's say, 20 years when we tailed off and keeping that communication going. But I know that when Lawrence Saunders was here, he was inquiring where some of those things were. And I really, because I had already heard that they were back in storage and I didn't really tell him that. So I think this idea is gifting into the heritage is good. My conversation with Karen tells me that they want to put them up on display again because the town really hasn't displayed them well. And when you start putting things in the storage, it's sort of, are we really still connected with them? They're very proud to say that the ship was named after our community, and that's why they come up on Remembrance Day and VE Day and all those occasions, because they want to maintain that. So I think for us to give them as a gift, it doesn't mean that the heritage keeps them forever. As my conversation is that with Karen was that they're looking forward to doing a proper display to show them to people who want to know more about the history. And if there comes a time that when we'd like them back for an occasion or whatever else, then they're free to come back. They're not going to take them and say, hey, these are ours, nobody else. So I love this idea. The heritage, they know what they're doing. They know how to display it. And so I really think this is a beautiful idea and gives us a chance to maybe, bring the people's attention back to what we're connected with, whether it be the HMCS Sackville or whether it be the Hussars. I love the idea, and I really support it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tower. Mr. Burke, do you wish to weigh in?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, members of council. I'm just going to say it may be worthwhile for us to turn it over to the treasurer, Michael Beale, who I know has been here through the transition from the old town hall to the new town hall. And I know, just in having conversations with staff and being in the storage room myself, that a lot of the items were donated to the provincial archives, and some other stuff was left behind for us. Somewhere along the line, the decision was made to put out a call for public art in this building, which resulted in us not having a location to display things, and having that type of display or exhibition space to house some of those archives that were inherited over the years has never made it to the council floor as a potential item or priority. So Michael, maybe if you could take a minute, could you just kind of maybe walk us through the process of kind of packing up and moving from the old town hall to the new town hall? I think that would be good context for council to have and for those listening as well.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, when we moved from the old town hall to the new town hall, of course, everyone knows the space was limited at the old town hall. The basement was our storage room. But we had someone from the provincial archives come down and go through and look for everything that they could that they would take. So anything provincially or anything that was directly municipal related, old minute books, old financial documents, go directly to the provincial archive. They are the storage location for provincial and municipal and any other level of government. Anything they did not want, we then offered it up to Tanchmer Heritage Trust because they had the space and the availability to take control of it. When we moved into this building, the public art installations were part of the 1%. There was a policy that was put in place years and years ago that allowed for any new construction that council would allocate a 1% budget towards art. So that's what we did. Call for proposals relating to artwork, and that's why a lot of the locations throughout the building ended up being artwork. So we always reach out to the provincial archives, and we don't require gift agreements or anything with provincial archives because they are the governing body for municipalities. Secondary to that, I should say also, what didn't go to provincial archives, I do believe we also offered to Mount Allison libraries as well to have the offer where they have the space. So we do not have an archives other than the file storage room here at Town Hall and the council storage room off the backside. We do not have any archive space that would meet the standards required to keep the paper and the items in good quality and good working in good shape that beyond long term. So can't send them out to Public Works and put them in a garage area because they would get destroyed from dampness quite quickly. So it's our sequence is Provincial Archives, Mount A Library, and Tanchmer Heritage Trust when things need to be disposed of.
Thank you for that, Mr. Beale. I hope that helps place that in context for everybody. Are there any other questions on this topic? So that will be on the agenda for next month. And if there are no further questions, we don't have any more items on the public forum. We will need a motion to move to in camera. And I just want to remind everybody that that is also going to be when we lose the live stream because of the technical problem tonight. So unless there's anything else, anybody else wanted to discuss of any of those topics, we would take a motion to move to in camera.
Councillor Tower, I move we move into camera.
Moved by Councillor Tower.
I'll second that motion. Councillor Butcher.
Thank you, Councillor Butcher. Question? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The motion is carried.
Okay, just give me 30 seconds, Your Worship. The live stream will continue until I can get it stopped.
Okay.